everybody. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I am your co-host, Aubrey.
And I'm Davey, and we're glad that you're joining us on this special episode. This is a little bit different, isn't it, Aubrey?
Yeah, we're doing something a little bit different right now. So normally right now, David, I would kind of be introducing the guest that we have for you today and the conversation that you'd be listening to. Instead, we thought it would be really, really important, crucial, meaningful, etc., for me to have a conversation with Davey.
Yeah.
Processing the trial, because the trial, man, wrapped up what? Where are we now, Davey? 3 weeks out?
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago. So it was at the end of September. And so this is going to be released at the beginning of November.
Yeah.
So it's been a couple months
now
that you guys are listening to this. And purposefully, we didn't just immediately decide to, all right, let's talk about this.
Wanted to give Davey some time to process and Christy some time to process. So Davey, before we kind of dive in and I just say like, how are you doing? I recognize we've got some new listeners over the past several months. And also we've got the faithful Nothing is Wasted audience that really has been journeying with you. Some are your very good friends, family members.
Some have listened to the first episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast when we first started,
and
we're reading the blog before that. Yeah.
Right.
You're right. Family and friends, some family who were actually walking the entire season of Losing Amanda with us. We're in the hospital. We're, very much present through the whole thing. And so, anybody who's listening to this, I just want to say thank you for journeying with us and thank you for your prayers. Yeah. Most importantly, thank you for your prayers and your support.
So good. So Davey, especially for the folks that are new to Nothing is Wasted, would you, we don't need to take a really long time on this, but kind of give our folks a recap of your story and why we're talking about this trial now, because I think some people will be like, wait, do you mean trial? Didn't this happen 7 years ago? So let's
That's funny that you mentioned that, because there have been people who have said that, even just the past couple of weeks as we spent some time traveling and, I caught up with some of our friends, folks that I was on staff with at New Spring. I was at an event down there a couple of weeks ago, and and I was like, the trial just happened. And they're like, wait, it just happened, and that seems to be somewhat of a common sentiment that sometimes people think that, that these kinds of things just happen immediately, that it goes through the due process of law really quickly. And sometimes it does. And sometimes it doesn't. In our case, it absolutely did not. And that's for a lot of different reasons. And if you've been on the journey with us, we've tried to stay pretty up to speed on certain things. Now, there would be times that the trial would get scheduled and delayed or pushed back. They call it continued is what they call it. And we didn't tell you that because it was far enough out that there was no reason to even tell you a trial date.
Right.
But that has been the story for the past 7 years, since November 10th, 2015 was when my home was broken into while I was at the gym, and when Amanda was murdered in our home. I came home to discover her, and she was still breathing very laboriously, but she was unconscious. And so I called the paramedics, and we got her to the hospital. And it wasn't until about 24 hours later, the morning of November 11th, 2015, that doctors came into her room as a couple of us were bedside and told us that there was no brain activity. She'd been shot 3 times, one in her arm, one over her back, and one in the back of her head. And so what they surmised after, being in the hospital there is that that her involuntary processes of her body were keeping her alive essentially, but it was deteriorating really quickly. And so they kept her alive for a little bit via machines, because she ended up donating some organs as well. So, this is kind of the 24-hour period that we're in the hospital. 2 weeks later, they make arrests of 3 men. You could almost say boys. One was at the time 18, one was 21, and one was 25.
Wow.
And so those 3 men, the 25-year-old is Deano Gordon, 21-year-old Jalen Watson, and the 18-year-old was Larry Taylor. So over the course of the next 7 years, the trial would be scheduled, it'd be pushed back, it'd be scheduled, it'd be pushed back, it'd be scheduled, it'd be pushed back. And there were a few reasons for it. one of the main reasons, or a couple of the main reasons, the main defendant, Larry Taylor, who was, as the investigation went on, they realized that Larry was the only one in the house with Amanda during the time of the shooting. He was the actual shooter.
Yeah.
That he kind of flip-flopped a lot in terms of wanting certain representation. You know, he couldn't afford an attorney, and so he requested state representation, and so they assigned him a state defendant. And then at one point he decided to go pro se, which means he wanted to defend himself. And so then the prosecution had to essentially submit all of the evidence to him and had to catch him up on the case, which is a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence that we're presenting against you as you're trying to represent yourself.
Wow.
That didn't make any sense to us.
No.
I asked the prosecution at one point during that time period, why would he do this? And they were like, it really doesn't make any sense. He has zero chance of, he pleaded non-guilty, zero chance of winning in this case because you just don't represent yourself. You just don't know what to do.
Right.
And so he's like, it's going to be a kind of a circus, to be honest with you. And so we were kind of concerned that, he was trying to build some 7 minutes of fame kind of thing and just make a circus or a mockery of the courtroom. And so, there's all these emotional highs and lows that kind of went on with this.
Yeah.
And then all the way up to like the week of the trial, while he was supposed to represent himself, he goes, no, actually, I'm changing my mind. I want to be assigned to represent. So he was essentially playing the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Delaying what seemed to be the inevitable. I don't know if he had some kind of a strategy. What I now have observed of Larry Taylor is that there's a lot of mental unhealth. So, and we'll talk about that as we talk about trial. But our life over the past 7 years has been, we will gear up emotionally. We will plan for our calendars. We will plan our calendars for this trial. We will plan knowing that, what we know, nothing is wasted, right? It's important to arm yourself spiritually, emotionally, mentally for these kinds of things, and then be able to go and process these things. A lot of what I do for a living is traveling and speaking. And so I would like block off my calendar to not go and travel and speak for a month after the scheduled trial date. The same thing would be true of Amanda's dad, because he's a pastor. So he would arrange his entire congregational schedule around this stuff. And then sometimes the week before it would change.
Yeah.
And
what a roller
we would have to kind of figure it all out again. So that was the past 7 years. So, and it's really interesting as we started to approach this particular trial. The last time that it got continued was back in December of 2021, when it was mistried for the first time.
Yeah. And unpack that for our listeners.
Yeah. Essentially what happened in December is that there was some information that Amanda was pregnant, and that was leaked actually by the judge inadvertently to the seated jury. And there was enough of the other jury, the jury, I don't know what you call them, applicants or the people who possibly could have been
jurors,
could have backfilled the jury. There was enough people in that room that heard that. And that was not supposed to be brought in on the record as admissible testimony, because it would have tainted the jury's their ability to deliberate whether or not he was guilty. It would have like possibly swayed their emotions.
Yeah.
He was being tried for, did he murder Amanda?
Right.
Not, did he murder Amanda or a pregnant woman, or
or Amanda and her baby.
Yeah, and there's like there, and I see I understand that, right? And so then there was when the defense moved for that years ago, concerned that there might be an emotional bias that would be played into the juror's decision right there.
Yeah.
Then the judge granted that. The prosecution said, okay, can we do an enhancement on the conviction? If he's convicted as guilty, can we then retake that into consideration? So it's not part of the jury's deliberation, but it's part of the judge's sentencing deliberation.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there was a difference there. So that was kind of how they solved that.
Okay.
That essentially got leaked to the jury. The problem is our story has been in the
everywhere.
News so much everywhere. And so news articles, everything, you you know she was pregnant. And so it was very difficult for them to find a jury that had not been tainted by that did not know that.
Right.
And so again, it got mistried later in June of this year for the same reason. This time, another juror actually began to, tell all the other seated jurors about the case, and someone had a conscience and came forward and said, "Hey, I don't feel good about this."
Yeah.
What the prosecution later told me is that they were really struggling to find a jury that was going to be unbiased because, and this is interesting how they shared this with me. They said, the people that we want on this case, we want law-abiding citizens who are very conscientious of their community and want a better community. And typically those are people who are very aware of what goes on in their community.
Isn't that
who
true?
watch the news.
Wow. Right.
And so we're struggling because the people that we were getting through our vetting system they were like, honestly, it was a little bit dicey. And we weren't confident in that. Well, fortunately, I think this is fortunate, and I think I can commentate on this now since it's all said and done. It's over. But fortunately, the defense and Larry Taylor got so frustrated with the process as well, ironically.
Wow.
That they moved to do a bench trial. The defense moved to do a bench trial, which means no jury, just the judge.
Yeah.
So that's what we went into September going, okay, there's not going to be a jury here.
Yeah.
This is just going to be
just a bench trial.
Yep. So now what's interesting is as this summer, when it got mistried this summer, my mom and Christy and I were talking. We were on a road trip, and we kind of came to this realization that this would be 7 years almost since the tragedy.
Unbelievable.
And what's interesting about that number is that 7 is a very biblical number, right? It's the number for perfect completion.
Yep.
And there's not, it's tough to kind of make something like, I had to wrestle with like, what does that mean? Right. But I also knew on the front end of that Amanda and I had been married 7 years.
Wow.
So we were married 7 years. And then it took 7 years for this to actually come to quote unquote justice.
Wow, Davey.
Right?
Wow. Davey.
So you've got these 2 7-year periods, and you can look at it and interpret it in a lot of different ways. I feel like what the Lord was telling me is that there was going to be a perfect justice, not necessarily here on this earth, right?
Yeah.
But the time period that it was going to take for justice to come to fruition on this earth was more of a pointer to there is a perfect judge.
Wow.
That one day there's going to be perfect justice. And we'll talk more about that as we get into this conversation, because I've done a whole lot of thought on and research even on that topic, right? A lot of my just like wrestling with the Lord has been about this idea of the difference between retributive justice and restorative justice.
Yeah.
And that's a big concept. So the other thing too is that, people kept saying like, I can't wait for you to get closure. I can't wait for you to get closure for this. And I would look at it and say, well, like, first of all, this isn't going to bring closure because this doesn't bring her back. Like what kind of closure does this bring? And we were advised early on, actually by the prosecution. This was interesting, not by believers necessarily, but I approached them when I started dating Christy, and I said, hey, is this going to, if I start dating again, is this going to jeopardize the case at all?
Right. Good question.
And they were like, no. They said, you need to move forward with your life.
Huh.
They said, we have no idea how long this is going to take. So you need to move forward with your life. And you need to, this is what they said, you need to find closure outside of the courtroom.
Wow.
And that was some of the best piece of advice. Now, we know that spiritually, right? Like closure happens in the supernatural. It doesn't happen here on earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing that could take place here on earth that's going to really give us a sense of, the fullest sense of redemption and restoration, right? We just see little glimpses of that. We see it dimly, as scripture will tell us. And so that was really good, because I'm going for 7 years now, we're being, it felt like being strung along in this process.
Yeah.
If we had waited to have closure. Now, what's ironic about that, afterwards, when it's all said and done, it felt like there was a little kind of tangible sense of closure.
I was going to ask you that. Like, even though they said don't wait for closure, did you feel a sense of, do you now feel a sense
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can definitively explain it. I told somebody this the other day. I said, I can't tell you why.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like a chapter is closing, and it feels like a new one is opening up. And there's a lot of other things that are happening circumstantially around like our family and our ministry and everything else too that kind of brings a little bit of that sense as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that like highlighted that, kind of the hallmark of that, is the fact that this has taken 7 years.
Wow.
7 years is seven's the number of perfect completion, like closure, right?
Yeah.
8 is the number of new beginnings. And so, so yeah, that's been a surprising thing for me. I didn't think that I would feel a sense of closure or relief, maybe you could call it.
Yeah. Right.
But I do feel a little bit of a sense of that. And it's it feels almost prophetically ethereal, if that makes sense, right? Like,
yes,
you know, when there's like, when you feel there's something prophetically happening, it's like, I can't put my thumb on it. I don't know why I sense this, but I sense it.
Yeah. And
then it's after something transpires that, you know, really confirms that you go, that's why I sensed it. Okay. I got it.
That's what the Lord was up to there.
And that's what I'm feeling and sensing right now.
Yeah.
And from the moment that we need to talk a little bit about these three things: the week of the trial.
Yep.
The sentencing for.
Yep.
Deano Gordon specifically, who was one of the accomplices, and the sentencing for Larry Taylor. Yeah. So over the past 4 weeks, 5 weeks, those are the courtroom appearances that we've had to make.
So let's go back to the week of the trial, Davey, and start there.
Okay.
So you walk into the court that day.
Well,
take us there.
Because I was a witness. I was subpoenaed.
Wow.
Even though because that morning, you know, I found Amanda that morning. And so I had to bear testimony to the events of that morning. So because of that, there's a law called the separation of witnesses, where you're not allowed to be a part of any of the court proceedings until after you give testimony, and then the judge grants that your subpoena you can be released from your subpoena.
Okay. Gotcha.
So for the first, like the opening argument or opening, you know, arguments and stuff like that, and even the first couple of witnesses, I was not able to be in there.
Wow.
It did allow me to go into the courtroom and just kind of get my bearings, which was good.
Okay.
Because when you go into this situation, right, like all of us, we were so on edge and just like, what is this going to feel like? This is the first time I was in the room with Larry Taylor, with the shooter. I had been in the room with Jalen Watson and with Deano Gordon, both of the accomplices, because over the course of those 7 years, those two took plea agreements to testify against Larry Taylor.
Yeah.
And so I had been at hearings before with them. This was the first time with Larry Taylor. So we're all just like,
oh, Davey.
You're trying not to make so much of it, but you're also like, this is a huge deal.
It's
like
massive.
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm going to testify about how I found the love of my life while looking at the man who stole her life. Right? Like this is, and so you don't know how to wrap your mind around the bigness of that moment. And so you're just like, Lord, you're just going to have to, like, I don't even know what this is. I can't prepare myself for this. And you're just going to have to take over. And, you know, and that's what we sent an email out to the entire Nothing is Wasted community. We said, you know, above all, would you just pray that the Holy Spirit's presence is there, and that it feels from everybody, there's a palpable difference. And I'll tell you this, Aubrey, there was a palpable difference.
Oh, amen to that. Ooh.
In fact, after, I'll fast forward for a second just so you can, after the trial was all over, after the verdict was handed down, the judge leaves his seat and starts to write. One of the bailiffs stands up, because let me kind of preface it with this. I was amazed and just like so appreciative of how many friends and family were there for us.
Wow.
I mean, my mom's sisters coming all in from out of town, and like Obviously the whole Byers family, like everybody, right? Just like
Amanda's
folks who've been
family.
journeying with us, right? Amanda's family. And so my parents and, but the bailiff stands up and goes, I have never witnessed a group in the gallery who have had the spirit that you guys have had.
Come on. Makes me want to cry.
And then we walk out and we're just like, oh, thank you. Right. Assuming that this guy, now this is a huge bailiff, like, I think prison guard, just right.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that didn't match the persona that I had for you. But, and then we walk out and someone goes, that I've never heard any bailiffs, let alone that guy, say anything like that.
Wow.
So the Lord was there and he was present. And I think that almost even surprised me a little bit, even though we were praying for that. Because when I finally walked into the courtroom and took the stand, there was a calm.
Wow. Praise
you know
God.
what I mean? Like, and it was almost like this is really weird. I
like
shouldn't
odd,
feel this
like
calm.
notable. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I shouldn't feel this calm. And then, and here's what drives me crazy, Aubrey. You're just getting me unfiltered right now.
I love it.
Throughout this whole journey, we've also had not a lot. We've had a few loud, what do you want to call them? Conspiracy theorists.
Critics. Yeah. They post their videos about how, yeah. I've seen the videos. I think I've been tagged in one or two. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. They grab a segment from me in Good Morning America and they do some kind of statement analysis and they say, man, he doesn't look like he just lost his wife. And they literally pick apart everything. And,
he was smiling at this one moment and therefore, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
And you're just like, now I'm a 3. Okay. So I'm very aware of how when I show up, how it might, like the optics of it, right? Like, and unfortunately, like being aware of those things made me feel it almost like debilitated me for a season because it was like I can't show up and say anything, which I think was honestly looking back on it, that's the enemy's ploy at trying to silence ministry and impact that would come out of this, right?
Yeah, totally.
So he's trying to play on my personality of like, I grew up. My dad's a pastor. I grew up on stages, singing, musicals, like acting, all that kind of stuff, right? Performing it. And so there was a little, like, even when I got in there and I sat down and all of a sudden I'm like, this feels very calm. This rush of the Holy Spirit coming over me. There was a little bit of like oh no, am I too calm? You know what I mean? And all of a sudden I start getting...
You're like having an out of body experience, kind of condemning yourself almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
And where the Lord has kind of ministered to me up until this point is just like, and my dad said this to me too on the phone. He's like, Davey, you just show up however you're supposed to show up. Like, don't try to show up in any particular way. If you get emotional, you get emotional.
Yeah.
If you don't, you don't.
Yeah, that's so good.
And that's okay. Either one of those is okay, right? And I think it was really helpful just to feel the freedom then. It's like I had to remind myself in that moment while I'm getting questioned.
Wow.
Just be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just be okay with whatever the Holy Spirit wants to do. Yeah. And almost like turn your emotions over to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Which is kind of like a little bit of it feels a little bit contrary to what we say often. We're often like, hey, you should remind your emotions sometimes of how you should like kind of have dominion over your emotions. And like in this, the Lord's like, no, actually, why don't you just let me kind of determine your emotions? Like, let this be a Holy Spirit emotion thing. And so if you're supposed to cry, let the Holy Spirit like, make that happen. Just be free with whatever it looks like.
Wow.
And for me, that was very freeing. That was just very freeing. It was a very big inner conflict that was happening moving up to that point. So, so I felt very calm and poised while giving my testimony, but then there was one thing they asked. I called after I called the paramedics while I was sitting there with Amanda, I called my dad and And I think I've shared this before, why, but I called the paramedics, and then I'm sitting there waiting, and I call my dad to tell him, I don't know what happened. You need to like pray right now.
Yeah.
And the prosecution asked me, they said, why did you call your dad?
Huh.
And it just like emotion just hit me like a wave, right?
Davey.
And I just start like, I couldn't answer. I'm just like, because I was not realizing for the first time, but it was reoccurring to me.
Like in the moment.
Yeah. That the reason I called my dad is because my dad has always been there for me. He's always been present in my life, been there for big moments, good and bad.
Yeah.
And he's always like, if I've needed him to fix something, he's been willing to fix something. Right. And so I'm like, if anybody can fix this right now, it's my dad. And I called him in this panic moment, right? This moment of trauma.
Yeah.
And then while I'm on the phone, realize my dad he's 500 miles away. He cannot do anything about this.
Aww.
And it was like, I don't even remember. I think I hung up on my dad. Right. So I like,
yeah.
But I'm telling this to the court and I'm just crying. My dad's always been there for me. And, that's meaningful. And I say that because as I've reflected on that, I'm like, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to be described of me as a father.
Yeah. Right.
So my dad's always been there for me because that probably played more into my healing journey. Just that foundation that my dad's there for me.
Wow.
That played into my healing journey than maybe anything else.
And
right?
maybe more than you even realized.
Right. Not even. And so like 7 years reflecting back on it going, well, the whole thread of my healing journey has been God's with me.
Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
My dad is with me. My heavenly Father is with me. And so my earthly dad couldn't fix anything in that moment, but my heavenly Father can restore this. Right. And so it was like all that was hitting me in the courtroom. I'm just like, Davey. So, while I'm standing next to this earthly judge, and there's the metaphor of like heavenly judge and prosecution. And, you're going,
what is this moment?
Wonderful, right? Jesus says, we talked about this in December, wonderful counselor. Yeah. Right. And a counselor is a attorney, and so you got, that's like, that's being the mediator for you, or that's, so I'm just like, all this stuff is hitting me. And
all at once. Unbelievable. Yeah.
So that's when I got emotional. That was my, so anyways, I'm rambling right now, but
no, you're not. This is powerful.
Once my testimony was done, then it was like, there was like a big weight that like,
I bet there was. Yeah.
Now the weight started compounding a little bit more over the next couple of days. The Nothing is Wasted content library of resources and podcast episodes are made possible by our growing community of members. If you would like to be a part of having a global impact and help people partner with God to take back their stories, consider joining Community Plus for just $20 a month. Your membership comes with access to a course called Position for Redemption, masterclasses taught by our certified coaches, bonus podcast episodes, and Q&As with myself and some of our other special guests. You can get more information and sign up at nothingiswasted.com/community. I look forward to connecting with you further within our Community Plus platform. Once my testimony was done, then it was like, there was like a big weight that like,
I bet there was. Yeah.
Now the weight started compounding a little bit more over the next couple of days, because the way the prosecution had communicated this to me leading up to it was, we have an unbelievably solid case. Like, we definitely have the right guy.
Yeah.
Like, we're really confident in this.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things they couldn't disclose to me because they can't disclose certain things until you get to court. And it goes on record. You don't want it to, their strategy or whatever to leak to, that sort of deal. So, so the first couple of days, all of us as a family, we are literally going, is there even a case here?
Oh, wow.
Like we're struggling.
Wow.
After 2 days.
Wow.
Not even like, oh no, we don't have enough evidence on this guy, but going, did we even get the right guy?
Oh, Davey.
And that was very unnerving.
Now, tell me why that was coming up, because you didn't know what the case was. And so you're just like doubting. Okay.
Because we didn't know. And part of so we are familiar with courtroom dramas.
Yep.
And courtroom dramas show the escalations and the climaxes of a particular case, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't show literally every single detail.
Yeah.
Part of what I learned about the judicial system here in this, and then my one of my uncles is an attorney as well, and so I would ask him afterwards. They'd be over. We had everybody over at our house afterwards, and we would just kind of debrief and just whatever. Like if we needed to minister to each other,
we would do that.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So you're talking about 30 people at our house, which props to Christy. Holy cow.
Seriously,
that she's like
it's amazing.
Carrying the emotional weight of this.
And hosting people and
hosting people. And, you know, so everybody's over at the house and we're eating, and I asked him, and, you know, so I'm getting his kind of take on stuff. But what I learned is that anything that was at all admitted as evidence, it's essentially like there's a big old checklist. If you're a one on the Enneagram, you're going to love this. You should go be like a prosecuting attorney. There's a huge checklist. And if you don't walk through with due diligence anything and every finding, and either determine this is relevant for the case or this turned out to be irrelevant, the entire case could end up getting thrown out.
Whoa.
So the prosecution has to go through this very detailed, I mean, it's extremely detailed. And you're like, so what we were hearing over 2 days was like, here's a piece of evidence that was admitted. It was determined irrelevant for this reason. Here's a piece of evidence. It was determined irrelevant for this. Here's a piece of evidence. And we're going, what in the world?
Like, do we have any evidence? Yeah.
Like, is there anything going on here? Right. So,
wow, Davey.
So that was extremely
that
unnerving
would be
at first.
Unnerving. Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't unnerving because it was like, this is where I was wrestling through. I was like, why is this unnerving to me? It was unnerving to me because the thought of, for 7 years, we might not have the right guy.
Oh, could you imagine? I mean,
and that for 7 years, the guy that actually killed Amanda
is like
somewhere out there,
free roaming the streets or whatever.
Right.
Whew.
So that began a little bit of a dilemma in my mind that, you know, later was kind of, you know, evolved into this retributive justice, restorative justice kind of thing, where it was like, all of a sudden, you know, what I have gone on record multiple times saying is like, I've chosen to forgive, I've chosen to forgive, I've chosen to forgive.
Yeah.
A lot of that is through the lens of knowing that the 3 guys were incarcerated.
Right. Like, I've chosen to forgive these 3 guys that are behind bars. Right.
Well, and the assurance of knowing we got him. We caught him.
Yep.
Right. All of a sudden, if there was even like a thought of like, he might still be out there, that almost started to untangle some of the like forgiveness thing that I was feeling. Where it's like, no, we got to catch him. We got to get we've got to get this right. And then also wrestling with like, wait a minute, what if he is the right guy, but we don't have enough evidence and he walks? How would I handle that?
Yeah.
And that was a very vulnerable thing to feel. And a very I mean, honestly, I'm not sure how this episode would have gone talking to the Nothing is Wasted community if, you know, we go through a week of trial and they're like, Larry Taylor was found not guilty.
Oh.
And I'm going,
yeah, it'd be a totally different.
What?
Because you literally would have witnessed like injustice. And that's a very difficult thing to wrestle with.
And questioning and doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it made me have a lot of empathy for some of these crimes that you hear about, or that, right? I mean, we hear a lot of people's stories, but people who have not, they haven't caught the person who's behind it, or they haven't, they are not experiencing quote unquote justice on this side of eternity.
Yeah.
And all of the different nuances that we can talk about, right?
Yeah.
The wrong person being convicted. You're going, so all of a sudden my empathy meter just begins to expand as I'm starting to freak out and feel more human.
Wow.
In this, and going, what in the world, right? Because I understand that the posture I've taken it's not a human posture. It's like, I don't want to say superhuman to like boast of me. I mean, like supernatural posture to take of going, I forgive these guys. I forgive. I understand that. I'm very aware of that because it's been a supernatural work inside of me.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I felt very human. over those 2 days. And court made me feel very human. And that may not be very hard for some people to admit. It's very hard for a 3 to admit, like, hey, I'm human
you're
and
limited,
I'm feeling
and
some things that I am not liking how I'm feeling, because I'm not sure how this lines up even with the heart of Jesus. So we get done with the second day, and we're just like, now there was some emotional ups and downs during those first 2 days. I decided not to stay in the segment where the autopsy was being
Davey,
revealed.
Did Christy stay in for that?
Christy stayed in for that, and the rest of Amanda's family stayed in for that.
Yeah. Did you not stay in because you thought it'd be too much for you?
Yes.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I'm also the only one that saw her.
Yeah.
In the condition that she was when we found her, or when I found her. And so I have had to settle those images.
Yeah.
And praise God, like, he has done an amazing work to settle those images. It doesn't haunt me. I live with them. It doesn't haunt me.
Wow.
And that's why I tell people, like, I've had people ask me that. How are you not haunted by this? Because, people who have watched their loved ones die or have,
Right.
And I tell them, like, you do have to learn how to settle them. You do have to learn how to live with them. The Lord does a mighty work in that if you'll let him. You got to lean into it, but it is possible for them not to haunt you. You can have, quote unquote, closure, acceptance within that.
Yeah. Wow.
And the Lord will do his thing to do that. I know exactly. I've shared before how he's, like, revealed to me, like, how I did a whole blog series a few years ago on how I've dealt with the way that Amanda died, and like what the Lord showed me in terms of his presence with her. Even
can people still find that if they go to your website?
Yeah. Both on nothingiswasted.com and mine. The series is called "How Do You Deal with the Way Amanda Died?" Poses a question. I've had that question. So there's like 4 parts to the blog series.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's just kind of me talking through, like, how the Lord ministered to me in that. So because of that reason, I said there's not going to be anything good that's going to come of me revisiting this.
Yeah.
The other members of the family felt like that was part of their closure.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Right. And they'll have to, they can speak for themselves. Right. Some were glad that they stayed in, some wish that they had not.
Yeah.
And Christy, as a medical provider who had been in autopsy situations, felt like she could handle it. Christy will have her own commentary on this, but that was one of the biggest things that actually started to, as she's expressed already on Instagram, it began to initiate a grief process in her.
Wow.
That as I have kind of dialogued with her about it, it's almost like, I think it was the kindness of the Lord. I really do. As hard as it is to say that the Lord would expose us to those kinds of things in kindness, but it almost in some ways caught her up to speed in the grief journey with the rest of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because she never knew Amanda.
Right.
She was not around at all during, she was a observer, like she saw it on the news, or she, but, and then she's been a part of the family. So she's been in the wake of all of the grief over the past few years.
Right. And of course, raising one of Amanda's sons. I mean,
exactly. And then she's been raising Weston. And so there's been this like secondary grief that she's been bearing, and then primary grief to her own circumstantial situations in the wake of all of it. Right. But this was the first time that she felt like a primary grief for Amanda to this level. Right. Yeah, she's grieved for Amanda before, but to this level, like she, it's almost like she lived it. And she shared that with her. She's like, I lived this for the first time.
Wow. Wow.
And so she kind of says, I wish I hadn't been in there, but I also think that was her Enneagram 7 sharing that with her. Like, I wish I hadn't.
Avoid that pain.
I see that it was the kindness of the Lord that she did stay in there, and that she was forced to really sort through a lot of that stuff too. So
that makes sense.
Because it also brought us together.
That's what I was just
sharing
thinking.
Grief
you guys can share that together.
In that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, so 2 days, where we're just like, what in the world is going on? And when you have it, we all remarked about this, that on the third day, it was like everything came to a head, and it all began to make sense.
Okay.
And by the third day, I began to be very impressed with the prosecution team.
Wow.
And the case that they put together.
Wow.
And I was like, wow.
Hmm.
And I part of me feels a little bit guilty because our case had the full attention of everybody. I mean,
wow.
U.S. Marshals, FBI, like
wow.
they brought everybody in.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Seriously.
And I saw, man, that the Indianapolis Police Department, I mean, the way they treated us through the whole process, the due diligence that Detective Lynn was, by the way, Detective Lynn was just the most amazing person through the process. He is retired since in Florida. So he lives in Florida. He flew up for the entire week.
Come on.
To come and testify 7 years later.
Wow.
To testify multiple times for this.
Wow.
And there was just this, like, I mean, this kindness that, like, I mean, every time we would interact outside the courtroom, and just, you know, tears are welling up in his eyes, and he's just, you know, so you're like, man, like, I know there's a whole lot of, like, especially the past couple of years, there's been a whole lot of vitriol and rhetoric surrounding, you know, law enforcement and like law and order. And, you know, even saying law and order can elicit some really big responses from people, right? Depending on what side of the political spectrum you are on. But man, there's there's human beings.
Yeah.
That actually truly want to make communities a better place. And truly want not just to, like, punish criminals, but to, like, see people who have chosen to step outside of the order of God's ways, right? Like, if we want to talk about the supernatural, be restored. Right? Be restored into contributing members of society. Right? Value adding members of society. Like, I saw heart. I saw humanity in that. And I also saw a brilliance in the prosecution team.
Amazing.
I wish I could lay out, like, the detail. Like, if this was not, I might get criticized for saying this. It's fine. But when you're in court for like 9-10 hours, you go in and out of the feeling very personal, and then also being an observer of things. I'm sure. And analyzing certain things. And, like, it's almost like you're watching this on TV as well. So you're not like, man, you can't be like this, just ripped out emotionally the entire time. Right?
No,
so
absolutely
there were moments
not.
that I'm, like, stepping back, observing this, and I'm going, this would have been the most riveting, especially that third day, the most riveting television series. To watch how they put this together. Like, we would have all gotten to the end of this movie and gone, oh my gosh, that was brilliant.
Wow.
And so really what it came down to is there was no DNA in the house.
Unbelievable.
The only DNA was left on a scarf, a pink scarf that they stole to wipe down all of the DNA and fingerprints.
Wow.
And Jalen left that scarf in the car, the getaway car that they had stolen.
Okay.
As well as multiple other things that they had stolen that were left in the car. All the electronics and stuff they stole in that crime spree were pawned off and stuff. But a few other random things, like a bag of oranges, like a receipt from the money they were withdrawing from my account.
Yeah.
All of these different things that they left in the car. This one sweater was pinged in their system with Jalen's DNA.
Or scarf or sweater?
It was a sweater.
Okay, pink sweater.
And it began the trail of the entire investigation.
No way.
So they had that right there that led them on the trail. They did this unbelievable triangulation of cell phone towers to match phone calls that were happening between the two accomplices who were in the car going to try to steal money out of the bank account, and Larry, who was still in the house.
Who was still at your house.
They did these, I mean, they lined all this up, and they showed that it zeroed him in, like, within a block.
Wow.
You know, for this triangulation. It was so precisely accurate.
Wow.
And then they also were able to recover a bunch of stuff from Larry's phone, text messages that he had sent and Google searches that he had made.
Wow.
Specifically Google searching, you know, Fox News, pastor's slain wife, like all of these different news articles that had come up.
Wow.
They have these search records, and then immediately him texting somebody, I might go away for a while. I want you to know. And so he's like trying to line up certain things.
Wow.
So they recover all this data that he had deleted off his phone.
Whoa.
And what I learned about technology, some of you guys may know this, is that when you delete things off of your phone, maybe I shouldn't share this. You shouldn't.
No, we should all know that. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because now people can cover their tracks.
Off of your phone, yeah, it doesn't actually go away. What it tells the memory of your phone or any computer, any device, right? It tells the memory, hey, there's now space that could overwrite this previous data.
Okay.
So it basically says, here, you have this amount of space to overwrite. These are the things that can be overwritten. But until you overwrite it with new data, it stays
it's still there.
Well, they had taken him in and confiscated his phone, and they were able to pull everything off before anything was overwritten. So they're literally triangulating this case around all of these things. And on the third day, it all came into focus, and we were just like, oh my gosh, this is... So one, what it did is it confirmed to us,
this is the guy.
This is absolutely the right guy.
Yeah.
It would be on a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the third day, we also heard testimony from the other two.
Okay.
The two accomplices. Which brings me to, I don't know how much time we have.
No,
Aubrey.
we're great. Just keep going. Deanna and
Jalen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we got to see their demeanor.
Yeah. We
actually got to see some subtle interactions that were happening between Larry, who was sitting at the, defense desk, and them. Because when you're, like I said, when you're testifying, you're literally looking directly at the defendant in this courtroom. And so there were some interesting things that happened, like certain things that they said. Larry proved himself to be completely stoic the entire time. Prosecution told me that that's basically his demeanor. Right?
Okay.
Almost dead inside, like dead eyes.
Wow.
The other two are not the case. That's not the case. And I'll tell you in a little bit about Deanna's sentencing.
Yeah.
But there was just some interesting interactions that happened there where, like, finally we saw Larry get up in arms about something. Where he like took his cuffs and like slammed him on the desk, and where you're just like, okay, something just hit a nerve right there. Like, what's
something woke him up.
Yeah, but there's like a thing on the streets where it's like, you don't like you're labeled a snitch and you don't rat people out and stuff like that. And so there's a whole lot of like communal dynamics that were happening right there that we were trying to read into and observe, and and so the other thing that it showed me, this is our platform, so I'll say this, and there's not going to jeopardize anything. I wish I had an opportunity to talk to the defense.
Yeah. What would you have said? Like, why?
Because I was disappointed. Because I'm like, this really, like this, after seeing everything, this is very clear that this is the right guy. You're a state appointed defense attorney.
Yeah.
What I thought your job was to make sure the prosecution did their job right. It seems like you went beyond that. And when I was talking to my uncle, who's an attorney, like, hey, what's the defense's play? They're like, there's some things they're doing. He said, they're doing typical jury tricks.
Oh.
They're bringing things forward to try to present doubt.
Gotcha.
In a jury, like if there was a jury present.
But there's no jury present.
There's no jury present. So either they just didn't pivot when this turned to a bench trial, or that's really the only trick they know, or he's like, I don't really know, but it was confusing to me. And I think there's a huge, like, our judicial system is built around the fact that there's due process of law, that there is like habeas corpus, right? And that you have to like have even state appointed defense attorneys to make sure that the law is being carried out properly and appropriately. But like, to me, I was like, what's your play here? Like, why are you so I don't know. Just felt odd, to be honest with you, Aubrey. It was like, either you really don't think this guy did this, or because they were reaching.
Yeah, that's what I was asking you. Where did it feel deceptive, or why did it not sit well
very
with you?
Deceptive.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Thank you for drawing that out of me.
Yeah.
Yes, very deceptive.
Yeah.
It was just like, what? Like I just expected you to be like an Enneagram 1 that was just like, hey, just make sure you get the facts straight.
Especially in the
I just
law.
want to make sure you get
right.
Just make sure you get the facts straight. Make sure this goes on record straight. Make sure that this is clean and right, and
Yeah.
But like the deception that you're bringing in, the way you're spinning these things, I'm like, I don't know. This was weird. So I don't want to judge anybody, right? But I'm like, I wish I'd had a conversation. I wish I could sit down and go, why?
Yeah.
Like,
what was your tactic here?
I want to understand. Help me understand this, right? Like, what's your heart behind this right now?
Yeah.
Because it also felt very calloused. Like, do you see this entire family back here behind you that like their lives have been absolutely turned upside down?
Yeah.
And so
interesting.
I think I just brought a whole lot of stuff into just like, one, we just never know what's going on behind the scenes, what's going on in someone's life, what's like, but I almost want to shake the defense team and be like, hey, listen, you have no idea how this entire, like, why are you spinning things right now? Why are you trying to reach for these things right now? Like, just if you realize that this case was hey, this case is done. Like, I'm not going to try to. So again, I maybe I'm highly underinformed or undereducated on this, but it just, as someone who is a part of the victim family, like it just felt weird. It just felt weird.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, let's talk about sentencing. So I know, but I don't know if all of our listeners know, the sentencing of Larry Taylor happened first, right? And then you went back to the
sentencing of Deano Gordon happened first.
Oh, Deano Gordon happened first. Okay.
Yes,
so
almost immediately after trial. So real quick, Aubrey, Thursday midday was when the verdict was handed down.
Okay. Day 4 at this point?
Day 4.
Okay.
Day 4, midday.
Yeah.
Verdict handed down. And that's when I felt this like huge rush of release. Christy explains her experience that when the prosecution said the state rests, like gave final arguments, said the state rest, it's like that's when relief went over. I was like, wait a minute, like the past 7 years, and now that's it. It's in the books, right? The state rest.
Man,
that was a really powerful statement for her.
What a wild thing. Yeah.
And then when he handed down he was going through all of the different counts. It's 14 counts that he was charged with. He was convicted of 12 of those counts. He was going through the counts, and when he got to the count of murder, and he said guilty, it was just like, and I almost like, it was involuntary. I couldn't even like control it, But I had, Christy was sitting on my left. We were all sitting there together, all of our family. The whole family like stayed in town all week, just like friends were there, But Christy was sitting on my left, and then my best friend Kenneth was sitting on my right. He had flown up. He's a pastor in Delaware, and
good guy.
He's the guy that I was talking on the phone to out in the driveway, hung up with, and then walked in to find Amanda.
No.
Yeah. So it was a really, in a lot of ways, it was a really beautiful thing just to have like, here's Christy right here as a reminder to me of God's redemption and restoration through all of this.
Yeah.
And here's Kenneth right here as a reminder to me of a friend is closer than a brother, right? And as Scripture says that friends they're born for adversity.
Yeah,
and he's been walking with me through adversity for longer than 7 years, but definitely through these 7 years.
At least 7 years. Yeah. Wow, Davey.
It just reminded me how important it is to be a good friend.
Yeah.
To be a good, be
over the long haul too.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the sentencing, then the next Monday was the sentencing for Deano Gordon. Christy and I went by ourselves. The buyer's family had gone back to,
Oh, okay.
And this is just another one of the situations where literally it was like last minute. They're like, oh, by the way, we're doing the sentencing. And they couldn't come down for it. It was like, so it was just more frustration of that, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, so Christy and I went by ourselves to the sentencing, and Deano had several family members represented there. Man, this was huge. Observationally, several family members, all women.
Okay, interesting.
One male.
Yeah.
The male was his little brother.
Okay. Wow.
His little brother's name is, can't remember it now. Maybe I'm not supposed to remember. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And Deano's now in his 30s, right?
Deano's now 30 years old.
Okay.
And so, I in sentencing hearings, what you do is you're all the victims are given an opportunity to read or submit a statement. And basically in that statement, what you're supposed to do is kind of like talk about what was lost and,
yeah,
you know, and then offer suggestions to the judge on what you think the judge should do in considering the sentencing.
Okay.
Deano was getting sentenced for, it could be a max of 30 years per his plea agreement.
Okay.
So,
okay.
That was part of the agreement was to lessen his sentencing.
Yeah.
So we walk in, he has like a whole row of family members representing him and then his little brother, and the defense is also allowed to different defense attorney. This defense attorney was like extremely amazing. Like walked up to me afterwards and shook my hand and said, "I just want you to know I've been praying for you." And I'm just like, he had tears in his eyes. I'm like, that's a defense attorney I respect. Right.
Yeah.
So anyways,
right. Wow.
The defense is allowed to call witnesses too, as like character witnesses to help the judge kind of see.
Okay.
So he calls Deano's little brother.
Wow.
Deano's little brother, like from as a caricature, they couldn't look as more opposite, right?
Really?
If you look up Deano on, and you know, I have a heart for Deano now. I want to say all this stuff through the lens of like, my heart has broken for Deano after the sentencing.
Wow.
But Deano looks the scariest of all of them.
Yeah.
Tattoos all over his face, dreads, like, gold teeth, just like looks really.
Yeah.
And his brother, super clean cut, young black man now. I mean, he was 15 years old when all this happened.
Wow.
Right before all this happened, Deano was already on the streets. He was already in kind of gang life. Their family moved out to a suburb of Indianapolis. And so his brother was essentially raised through middle school and high school in a really solid school, really solid group of friends. So like you saw this very sociological study right in front of you, right? Which just like made my heart break for like the inner city and opportunities that are lack of opportunities, lack of resources and stuff. So
yeah. And would Deano's story be totally different had his family moved earlier? Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that really affirmed some of what God has done in me over the past few years is the fact that there were no male representations.
Yeah.
We find out later that Deano's dad had left the whole family, his uncle left the family, like all right. Crime, prison, all this stuff. So it's just the telltale story.
Yeah.
Of a lack of a father figure. Moms trying to do, aunts trying to do, everybody trying to communally do everything they possibly can to like hold this family together by a thread, but experiencing a lack of resources and lack of support. So, so I read a statement to Deano, and you know, I can post the statement or something later if we want to do that, but afterwards, so Deano's brother gets up and he says, first of all, I want on behalf of my mom and I want to apologize sincerely to the Blackburn family.
Whoa.
Just like acknowledging, like right out of the gate. Now here's this kid that was 15 years old when this happened, and now he's 7 years later, 22 years old. Right. And it's just like, wow. So very poised, very articulate, very confident, lots of courage.
Yeah.
But he was the only one that spoke on behalf of the family. You're just like,
wow.
Man. So I read my statement. Then Deano's given an opportunity to stand up and say anything he wants to. If he wants to plead to the judge, if he wants to talk to his family, anybody he wants to. He doesn't address the judge. He doesn't address his family. He turns around, looks directly at me, and he couldn't compose himself for probably
Aw.
2.5 minutes.
Wow.
Head down,
Davey.
tears coming down.
Whew.
And he just says,
Mm.
I have no idea how in the world I could ever tell you how sorry I am.
Mm.
And all of a sudden this like rough exterior just like melts, right?
Oh, gosh.
And he said, I want to acknowledge the fact that I could have stopped all of this. Like, takes extreme ownership.
Unbelievable.
He said, I could have stopped this and I can't live with myself.
Oh.
I don't know how I'm going to live with myself. I would absolutely hate me if I were you. And to hear you
Wow.
offer me forgiveness. And that
Which
you
is,
don't
well, you
hate
didn't say
me.
this, but that when you read
that's
to
what
him,
in
that's
my
part of what
statement.
your statement was. Yeah.
Right. And he said, I just don't know. I don't know how you can do that. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And he just kept over and over. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Davey.
And
Whew.
again, he didn't talk to his family. He didn't talk to the judge. He didn't ask for a lighter sentencing, nothing. That's what he did. That's
Just
what he chose to do with his
just
words.
owned it. That's a integrity right there.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I felt the Lord tell me, while this chapter may be closed, there's a new one opening up and you're supposed to go visit him in prison.
Oh, stop it.
And I'm like, oh crap. Like, how in the world
You're
is
like, of
this?
course. Okay, of course, God. Yeah. But if, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I want to say this, Aubrey, and please don't hear anything like superhuman out of all.
Totally.
Right,
Right. Hero. This isn't like
100%,
savior complex. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
This is like 100% the Lord. But when we were in jail and sentencing, he had a pre-sentencing before the trial months and months and months ago. One of his family members started crying. Christy grabbed a tissue, reached back, and handed it to his family member, to his like mom or sister or something.
Mm.
And later the prosecution goes, did you hand her a tissue? And Christy's like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Why? Like, that's just the human thing to do.
Right.
They were surprised by that. And we're going, why were you surprised by that? We never see that.
Wow.
We never see that.
Wow.
It's always polarized, two sides. One doesn't interact with the other.
Not going to acknowledge the other. Mm.
Well, after Jalen's sentencing, we went out, we talked with his mom and his sister. We prayed with them.
Come on.
We like, so we knew going into this that these moments are not just like very sterile, like law being passed down, sentencing being passed down. This is like, these are ministry moments.
Yeah,
right
this is holy. This is sacred.
This
the Lord
is sacred,
at work.
right?
Totally.
And
totally,
so
Davey.
when we get out of, so he gets 30 years, the max that he could get.
Yeah.
We walk out, his family starts to come out. And as they're looking at us, as they walk out of the courtroom, and I just like, I don't remember, it was maybe his aunt or something that first came out.
Yeah.
And I just gave her a big hug. And that entire group just melted.
Come on.
They're weeping, they're crying. Aubrey, I cannot explain to you what this moment was like. It was supernatural. It was surreal.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So we've spent about 30, 45 minutes just ministering to his family after that. And they were, just beautiful people. I mean, like just normal, literally like we could run into them at any moment, they're working, at a bank that we go into, or they're working at, like, it's just wonderful citizens of Indianapolis kind of thing. And, a couple of notable conversations there. One, his grandmother came up to me and she put her arm around me. She's like walking with not a crutch, but like a walker.
Yeah.
And she puts her arm around me. She said, 7 years ago, I was 7 years ago, she said, I was just gotten out of rehab. I'd done just a lot of just my life was messed up and I had lost hope in humanity. She said, watching you and your family and how you've responded to this has restored hope in humanity.
Stop it. Come on.
Like, that seems hyperbolic, but you're like, you don't know the impact that you're going to have in people's life just by how you respond to trial.
Oh, goodness gracious.
You're just like, I was like, oh my gosh, I just gave her a big hug. I couldn't say anything. I'm just like,
what can you say to that?
You know?
Right.
His aunt Christy and I were talking, and she said, I was so surprised seeing the two of you walk in. She was like, you guys are just so full of life, so vibrant. There's not an ounce of bitterness in your eyes. Wow. And I expected to just see like fuming anger and hate.
Of course.
But that's what the world expects, right?
Yeah,
and like, we're Jesus people, we're different.
Yeah.
And it's so profoundly, like when you shine light in darkness, right? How much it illuminates things. And they were just so impacted by it.
The fact that they even noticed it tells you something, right?
I walked up to his brother and I shook his hand. I said, I want to thank you so much for your words. And I said, I said, I looked at him, I said, you guys are church going folk, right? And his mom said, she laughed. She's like wiping tears away. She's like, yeah. And I said, you've heard the story of Jacob and Esau, right? Esau's the older brother. It was supposed to be the heir, was supposed to really lead the family, but Jacob ends up, and the older serves the younger. And I said, I'm watching right now in front of me. I remember his name. I'm not going to share his name because I don't think I'm supposed to share it now. But I said to him, I'm watching this story play out right now because you are a leader of your family. Yeah. And your family has lacked leadership. Yeah. And your brother is going to look up to your leadership. And I just started quoting for him, do not let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example. He's just wiping tears away. And it was just like, what is this moment
what
right
is
now?
The Lord
right? It's
doing?
Like prophetic, like
that's what I'm thinking. You're like prophesying over the guy.
And I'm just like, I mean, it was beautiful. And it was just like, and I don't say that to like boast in us. I say that to go, you just never know what kind of moments are ministry moments.
Well, and it just it doesn't sound like you're boasting. It just sounds like God was there, Dave.
He was so there. I didn't feel like it was myself. I'm like over here going, what is happening right now? It was beautiful.
We had decided to make this one episode, but as Davey and I have been sitting here talking, we felt like there was so much to say that it would be worth breaking this up into 2 episodes. And
you guys can tune in next time. I'm not sure when we're going to release this, but it will probably be in between our next normal release on Thursdays. So we'll do a special part 2 episode of this. Thanks for sticking in with us, and we'll talk more about this next time. Hey friend, if you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay in the loop every time Nothing is Wasted releases a piece of content here on this YouTube channel.